这个故事如果你听起来不累，那么你的英语能力在美国日常生活是完全够用的。要持续提升英文，记得点击订阅按钮。我们开始吧。
The cobblestone streets of London were muddy and crowded in the spring of 1715. The air smelled of coal smoke and sewage. A sense of unrest hung over the city. King George I was a new king, a German-speaking ruler on a British throne. Many people doubted his right to rule. Jacobite supporters of the exiled Stuart king plotted in shadows. But the common people had more immediate worries. Bread was expensive. Taxes were high. And when people gathered to complain, the government grew nervous. They saw not protest, but the seeds of rebellion. Parliament's response was the Riot Act. It was not a long document, but its words were heavy with finality. The law focused on a specific number, 12. If a dozen or more people were gathered unlawfully, riotously, and tumultuously, and refused to disperse for 1 hour after a specific warning, they were guilty of a felony. The punishment was harsh, hard labor or even death. The warning itself was a script. A magistrate or other official had to read it aloud, verbatim. The words were formal, archaic, and terrifying. Our sovereign Lord the King chargeth and commendeth all persons, being assembled, immediately to disperse themselves, and peaceably to depart to their habitations. The clock started ticking the moment the last word was spoken. The first significant use of the act was a bloody affair. In 1716, a mob in Suffolk, fearing new machinery would destroy their livelihoods, began wrecking looms and frames. The magistrate arrived, the Riot Act in his hand. He stood on a cart to be seen and heard. He read the proclamation. The crowd, fueled by anger and desperation, cheered. They threw mud and stones. They did not disperse. For a full hour, tension built. Then the soldiers arrived. What happened next was not a peaceful rest. It was a brutal suppression. Shots were fired. Swords were used. Lives were lost. The Riot Act was no longer just words on paper. It was a threshold, and crossing it meant bloodshed. The act became a standard tool for a century. In 1768, London weavers protested slashed wages. They filled the streets, a sea of angry men. The magistrates came out. The Riot Act was read. The crowd knew what came next. They had heard the stories from their fathers. They grumbled, they cursed, but they dispersed. The warning worked. But in 1819, at St. Peter's Field in Manchester, the system broke down. A vast crowd of 60,000 gathered to demand political reform. Local officials, terrified by the sheer number, read the Riot Act. Few could hear the words. Almost immediately, the cavalry charged into the packed crowd with sabers drawn. The Peterloo massacre left hundreds injured and 15 dead. The act had been read, but its purpose, to provide a clear, hour-long warning, had been ignored. The phrase, however, survived the tragedy. To read the Riot Act slipped out of the law books and into the language of everyday life. It described any moment of severe, unambiguous confrontation. A factory owner laying down the law to his workers. A Victorian father confronting his wayward son. It was a final line in the sand. The law itself was finally repealed in 1973, a relic of a more authoritarian past. But its legacy is everywhere. It's in the firm talk a coach gives a losing team. It's in the serious conversation a parent has with a teenager about broken trust. It's the last email from a boss before major changes are made. We all have our own riot acts to read. Moments that demand clarity and courage. Moments where we must state a boundary, not with anger, but with calm authority. We give a choice, and we must be prepared to live with the consequences of that choice. The history of this phrase teaches us that words are actions. They can prevent chaos or unleash it. Your voice, in your own life, has that same power. Speak clearly. Mean what you say. The most important rules you will ever write are the ones that govern your own world.
你太棒了，你学完了全部内容，你离英语自由又近了一步，下个视频见。